as I continued to get deeper and deeper, it was obvious to me that I kept spending all my time thinking about creators. I never really cared about the marketing side. I started to understand it really well, but it was always the creator side that I learned something new and holy shit, this is crazy.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Behind the Frames. And today we joined by Danny Desatnik. Danny Desatnik is the head of partnership at Creator Camp, as well as the host of the Creative Culture podcast. And he is someone who have really supported me to do this podcast since day one, and he's someone who's deeply reflective and good at connecting with people.
Modeling in your environment is so valuable and so necessary to get to whatever if you want to use the word dream or your goals or your ambition. The interesting thing there is that's obvious to them. That's not obvious to anyone else. Why is that obvious to them?
And in this episode, we talked about how Danny Desatnik started his career in accounting, then to sales as a BDR, and he created his own role as a creative initiative manager at Hashtag Pay. We also talk about how he had built the Creative Culture podcast, recording over 80 episodes, and we also talked about how can one really find his passion. And welcome to my episode with Danny Desatnik. You have this saying, a feeling that's hard to beat. Putting someone onto an artist or to a creator and seeing their passion for that person quickly match yours. What does that mean?
And I think what does that mean? It's almost what does it feel like, I think is the way I would answer this. That's my dopamine, or that's one of different feelings or different activities that lead to real dopamine for me. I don't know why I'm so relationship based. I don't know why connecting people or putting people onto something and then watching their love grow for that person or that thing or that industry or trend or environment gets me so excited. There might be a level of one validation that could be cool. The second thing though is I think when you go throughout life, a lot of the goal is just to meet the people that you connect to and go about experiences with those people and then experiencing those things together with the right people around you or finding the right people and having a vision and aligning with the vision of the other person or the other people and then all going on towards a mission together. And like that could be a business, but that could easily as be I share a new artist with you, you're a big fan, that artist is coming to Toronto where I live, we go see it together. It's the first time we've seen that artist together, but collectively we have that experience and my feeling almost gets shared with the other person. And so it's that connection which is I think so human, which makes me feel so good. And it also makes me feel good when like you see something in someone or you feel something because of something else and then you find people that also feel that same thing. Like to me that's the glue to either a friendship or that's the glue to a person and an experience that's going to lead to a long connection or a connection that's going to be deep, that's not going to run out, that's going to be really meaningful. So I think the validation's the one side, but it really comes down to the human element of wanting to find the people that connect to the stuff that I connect to, because then our interactions and how we go about life together is so much more meaningful and there's so much more depth to what it could be.
And at the beginning, you mentioned a little bit about I don't know why I'm such a relationship driven person.
Mm.
Has that been the case when you grew up, or was that something you explore and develop later?
Definitely later on. Um, I almost say that my life started when I was 24, 25. I don't remember that much about my childhood. I don't think I was super intentional as a child, and I think that's a weird thing to say because I don't know if children are intentional anyway. But when I grew up, and the things that I liked and the things that I remember I put time to, they don't really encompass what I'm so passionate about today and what I love today and what gives me that dopamine feeling today. And so where that comes from, I really don't know. Like my parents are great people, family's great people, and so maybe that meant something. But I actually haven't explored why that's so core to who I am and where that started. But if I pinpoint a time, it would probably be I think when I was trying to get into the music industry, um, which would have been on the business side, which I think would have been like 2018. And I think the way I thought about it, whether this was now becoming conscious to me or obvious to me now, but back then wasn't, or maybe I was more intentional about it, I didn't really have anything to offer at that point. I just come out of accounting. I didn't want to go into accounting or do any finance in the music industry. So my skill set was kind of bare. And when I tried to think of, well, what's the thing that I can do that could be of value? I think connecting people it's the cheapest, and I think it was the quickest way to value. Now, learned a ton, and being a good connector and connecting the right people is as much an art or a science as anything else. But I think that's where it started. And I think it was a beautiful accident that that's how I thought about things, or maybe it wasn't a beautiful accident, but maybe that's subconsciously where my mind would always go to, and that's how it started. And I think ever since then, so the past 5 years, that's always been core to who I am. And I think every year it's continuously grown and become a lot more not only core to who I am, but core to how I want to build a career and core to how I want to build my own brand.
For context, like before you joined Hashtag Pay, you work in a music campaign company, and even before that, that was you work at an accounting firm after you graduated from university studying business.
Mm.
So, rewinding back to when you were working in audit in an accounting firm after you graduate, that's your first job. What compelled you to develop the idea you want to try something else and eventually quitting?
Mm. I don't know. I really don't know. Like I don't I wish I vlogged those days. I wish I wrote during those days. I wish I recorded voice notes during those days because I'm fascinated to know like who was I back then? What was I thinking about? Um I knew I didn't like accounting. Accounting didn't come so easily to me. It wasn't something there was passion for, and there wasn't even something that there was such interest for. Typical growing up, wasn't really in charge of my own mind, my own actions. I just felt like, you're a paper bag in the wind. You're kind of doing a bunch of things that your environment is telling you should do or that you see often in your environment. That was kind of the modeling. And so went to business school, studied accounting because I didn't know at that point. Nothing had really interested me to a point of no one else is telling me to do it, but I'm just so excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into accounting because I guess it was safe and there was so-called like a designation that you could always fall back on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it was sometime around fourth year where I started to get into the music industry and get interested in it. I don't remember exactly why I started, but there was a book that I picked up called The Tanning of America by Steve Stout, which I reference as like the first thing that really got me excited about the music industry and what the prospects could be in the music industry or what life could be like. And then watching Complex's Blueprint series on YouTube with Noah Callahan Beaver and him interviewing people like Scooter Braun and Bobby Kim, Bobby Hundreds, and I was like, wow, this is like, what is this? What world is this? And then getting further and further into music and thinking about it, and then reading about it and following it. And I guess subconsciously, because I know this wasn't a conscious recognition at the time, but looking back, it was the thing that I was the most passionate about I've ever been in my life, and no one was telling me you should do it, and no one around me was really doing it. So I think that's a massive signal looking back now that I'm glad I followed. Um, get out of university, go work in audit, and not like nothing there connected. I didn't really connect with the people around me because again, there's zero creativity in the way that I think innately gravitate towards creativity, but I didn't know that at the time. The work wasn't interesting. The companies weren't interesting. Um, I didn't find that there were mentors. I didn't find like there was nothing in my life to really hold on to be like, wow, this is something to work for. And I was privileged to the point where I knew if I quit, I could go live at my parents' place, and I wouldn't have to pay rent, and I wouldn't have to pay for food. And my mom lives midtown Toronto, so it's not that far away from downtown. And I knew that I could just get some random jobs and I didn't have to make a ton of money. Again, super privileged, but didn't have to make a ton of money in order to so-called survive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that feeling, it definitely had something close to a panic attack when I was in accounting one night. I remember it clearly, and it just wasn't. anything for me. Nothing, no boxes were checked off, and so decided to make the leap, um, and decided to figure it out. And definitely one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
Mhm.
But I can't tell you why beyond thinking back and being like nothing lined up, no feeling was there. Like I felt horrible about it.
Yep.
And the music industry, even though I built this utopia in my mind of how cool this place was and how perfect and like beautiful this thing was, which it definitely isn't, that compelled me to change and then go on a different path.
Absolutely. It almost feels like in your fourth year, the book that you read has planted a little seed in your head,
Mm,
about
for sure.
how you wanted to pursue music related or creative related careers while just sort of like following what other people would have expected from you to pursue accounting from the first place. But
Yeah,
then maybe in the other job, like you had this desire to, okay, like I feel like nothing was really connecting, nothing was really giving me energy. I'm going to somewhere that is going to give me energy instead.
for
And you
sure.
decide to take that leap.
Yeah,
So
I think it's a good no, like it's a great recognition. And I think the last thing I'll say on this is modeling in your environment is so valuable and so necessary to get to whatever your, if you want to use the word dream or your goals or your ambitions. Like you look at that instance of um, that British runner. Wow, his name's escaping me now, but who broke the 4 minute mile, and no one had done it before him. And then, like 2 months later, like five people broke a 4 minute mile too. And I think it's so important for anyone who's trying to seek something and find one model, find one role model, one person to aspire to that's kind of done what you want to do, because then you believe that it's possible. And even if they feel so distant to you in your career and in your pursuit, at least you know it's possible, and now it's on you to go figure out like how they did it or how to kind of get to the position that they were in. And I think that was the big thing for me is I was never really around creative people growing up. My friends weren't in creative fields. We didn't really jam on music or movies or the internet or YouTube like I'm fully embedded in now. And I think it makes a lot of sense that I never picked that up when I was younger because that was never available in my environment and nothing ever showed me that it was something maybe to look at. But then now, or after accounting and breaking out and then going into the music industry, I felt that the frequency of people that I would meet that would be a little bit more like me or get me so excited was infinitely more than what I found when I was in business or in accounting or at Laurier. And so I think you're really right with that observation that it was innate, but the environment plays a massive, massive part.
absolutely. How I wanted to touch upon like when you after 1 year working in the musician campaign company, you decided on hashtag pay. So hashtag pay a is a brand management platform that connects brands with creators. And you started out not in your current role as a creative initiative manager. You started out as a sales representative, a BDR.
Mm.
Can you tell me a little bit about like how you went about pitching and created your own role as a creative initiative manager?
Yeah, it's something I think about a lot. And I remember thinking before I joined hashtag paid, or even when I was trying to get into the music industry, the idea of how did some of these people get their jobs? Like, those jobs don't pop up on LinkedIn, those jobs don't pop up on job boards. So, how do you get to that? What seems to be like this magical position where you have a lot of fun and you're doing interesting things and people want you in certain rooms. I had no idea. I think I always chased whatever that role was. That was to me, that was the sexy thing. But when I decided to not pursue the music industry full time on the business side, the advice I was given, and it was good advice, was okay, we'll find either tangential creative spaces, whether that's in marketing or that's actually in a creative industry and or an entertainment industry, and start with sales because at least you'll learn a lot. And I was someone where people knew that I was decent at building relationships, and they knew that I think some of my friends saw that, like the hustle of being able to build a network and try to find opportunities in the music industry might be able to translate well. And I think that's where the advice came from. And I think it was really bang on. It was great advice. And so got in for sales in hashtag paid, realizing that, oh, there's it's marketing plus it has to do with influencers. Honestly, I had no idea about the industry beyond like consuming some things and knowing some influencers and maybe watching some Casey Neistat videos and other YouTube videos. Like I understood it, but it wasn't something that I didn't understand the prospects of it. So got in, and I think this is where, as I started to note some friction. And one was when I was trying to pitch and sell to these brands that, hey, come run your campaigns on the platform or give us your budget and we'll be the agency for you. I wanted to talk about the interesting ways to activate with creators or put them on to new creators that they didn't know before and get them in early in the like that get them in early in the door, kind of like this music A&R mentality. And I
Mm-hmm.
found that all the conversations really weren't like that. It was very much like, well, what are the results going to be? How much do I need to spend? And what am I going to get out of it? And so when you realize, cool, their world as a marketer, the large majority, I'm not going to say all, I'm not going to blanket it, but the large majority of marketers, they have dollars that they need to spend and they need to spend it as efficiently as possible to reach their goals that have been set from their directors or top down so they can continue to have a job, so they can maybe move up and get a salary bump or maybe get to that next position that they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
They're not so much maybe like me or maybe like you who like loves finding talent, loves trying to find really interesting ways that are organic to objectives on both sides to build something that maybe hasn't been built before. And so realized that and started to get a little annoyed that that was the case. Like I'd have to be successful in selling a product, not being able to sell a vision and something new. Um, and then the second thing was I started to realize that I was more connected to the creator every single day that I would be in the industry, like consuming content, listening to podcasts, meeting creators, reading newsletters. I never really cared about the marketing side. I started to understand it really well, but it was always the creator side that I learned something new and holy shit, this is crazy. Like, oh, did you hear about this company in the creator space? Not like, oh, did you hear about what Pepsi's doing with their new digital spend in 2024? Like that didn't get me going as much as, oh, look at what this creative's doing. Look how cool this is. Look at this space that no one knew about before. At least I didn't know about before.
Mm-hmm.
And that kept going. And so I think naturally and I've seen this as a pattern with myself in a lot of places. And again, it kind of comes from this like privileged place that when I don't, when there's friction in the thing that I'm doing, it's almost like I innately go to do something well, can almost balance out the failure of not doing that right, like the thing that I'm supposed to be doing properly. But you still get a value of, oh, well, that's cool, or that's never been done before. Okay, I guess we kind of have to keep this person on. And so I would always joke with the company that I should have been fired as a BDR because I was so relationship based. Like I just wanted to meet people and build a network and talk about interesting ways of working with creators, not to the point of wanting to sell, and hit my targets every single month. And then on the other side, I wanted to get deeper into the creator space. Um, and I don't think this was so conscious. I think it was just me being a little selfish. I mean, like, well, with my time, I want to work on creator stuff. And so I started a podcast, which is the podcast Creator Culture that I still run. And that was oh, I don't see any other influencer marketing platforms or companies running podcasts about creators or with creators. Like, I really want to start a podcast. I want to do something of my own. Oh, cool. I want to do it with creators or at least the creator industry. Can I start it? Got really lucky that the company was like, yeah, cool. Here's Riverside. Here's a microphone. Go try figure it out. And like, and you find an editor and just go try figure it out. And that's exactly what it was. And then I think as I continued to get deeper and deeper, it was obvious to me that I kept spending all my time thinking about creators. I did not care about sales. I did not care about marketing. Again, not great from an employee perspective because I was there to do a job. And I essentially was doing a different job alongside like getting by with that job.
Yeah.
Um, and that passion kept growing and the interest kept growing and the ideas on the creator side just kept flowing and I tried to pitch I said to my team, like, I really want to get onto the marketing team. I want to find, is there some creator marketing thing that we can do? There were no positions related to it. And so luckily, I guess I built some good rapport and built some trust with the company. And they're like, oh, well, no one's really doing social media for us. Cool, you can go do it. Alex, I fucking sucked at social media because, again, like, I didn't want to do social media, but I wanted to do all things related to creators.
Yeah.
And so I would keep trying to just focus on creators or find things through social media to focus on creators.
Yeah.
Um, did that for 7, 8 months and was not successful, did not go well. But I kept getting closer and closer to the creator side, and the podcast kept growing, and I kept getting bigger guests on. And at this point, I start becoming friends with some creators, and the company can see that I am like the most passionate in the company, and anything creator related in the industry, I'm usually the person people are coming to either for perspective or to get invited or pushed over to someone or introduced to someone. And I think I just kept asking for it. I kept saying, like, I see this as a big opportunity. No one else is really focusing on creators in certain ways, on and on and on, built enough trust with the company. And a year and a half ago or so, maybe a little bit more, was able to jump into this role. And I had no idea what the role was. I was just like, we need to build our brand with creators or do things for creators. And again, luckily, the company trusted me. And then that was a journey that I went on. And it got to this point where the most valuable thing that I was doing for the company and the thing that I was best at and the thing that started to make a lot of sense was building our brand with different creators through different means. So the podcast fit into that. Running events, we ended up throwing or creating a really big event called Meet the Creators, which we've done 7 times. Then the team wanted to run dinners with creators and marketers. Then we have happy at like there were all these things that were very brand building and how do we get the right creator in the room or the right creator on the panel or the right creator, whatever. And that was the skill that I had and that was the network that I had built. And so stuff just started to make a lot of sense. And that's kind of how I ended up with this role and like so-called making my own role. And I think what I learned from it, where before when I was trying to get into the music industry, the idea was how do you get to those cool roles that don't exist, like how does that become a thing. And I think the formula is there. Like I think I understand the game and I think the game's pretty simple, but I think you have to be a certain type of person in order to get there. And what I mean is this, it seems like step one, get into a role and build trust and also have other people really believe in you for more than just doing your job. So like my first year, yeah, I wasn't a great BDR, but I started to show a lot of promise in other things that I was doing, lunch and learn, speaking on stage, doing my creator culture podcast. And that built a lot of trust with the company. Now, right time, right place. No one else at the company was doing anything related to creators, and I'm confident in saying no one else was as passionate about creators as I was. So again, you need a bit of luck too. Right time, right place. But build trust with the company by doing your job or doing something really really well, then the company starts to trust you, and alongside that, being observational, what's happening outside in the industry, what's not happening internally at your company, where do you see kind of this parity or this intersection coming together. If you have trust and they trust your voice and they trust what you're doing and you have this idea of what's happening outside, where's a little bit of white space, what can we do internally to change the game or go towards objectives that the company's trying to hit. So if you stay observational on both ends, then you kind of get to this point where you can pitch this, oh, there's this space here that nothing's happening in this space. I think we should try go own it. Here's my plan. This is what I think we should do. I think I'm the right person for it. Is step two. And then step three is actually winning that position and pitch after pitching. And once you win that position, you become the person. Like you pitched the vision. You saw the so-called white space and the opportunity. You have the trust of the company, and so now it's kind of like, cool, go do your thing. Like we put you in this position for a reason. Go do your thing. And so when you see these cool positions pop up amongst all these different companies and maybe all different industries, I guess it happens more often in entertainment. A lot of it happens again because you've built you built trust, and then you start seeing something that maybe other people aren't, and that aligns with where the environment or that company wants to go. But luck plays a huge part. Again, I was the only person, so that was so lucky. I had a manager and I still have a manager and VP of marketing who really believed in everything that I was doing. And so with like the preparation, luck, and maybe some innate skill is kind of where you get to this point. And so I think it's possible for any company. The last thing I'll say is that if you try do this at a public company, again, hashtag paid, we're like 100-ish people now. If you try do this at a public company, it's, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's really, really tough because like your role is your role. You have a lot more people that you're speaking to. You're reporting earnings every 3 months. Things are changing, directions are changing every 3 months based off of, again, where you're going, where the growth opportunity is. And so if your vision and who you are doesn't really align with the company or doesn't really align with this like consistent change every 3 months, you probably don't have that opportunity. So again, right time, right place, luck, a little bit of innate skill, and then seeing an opportunity for a long-winded answer.
Love that. Like I feel like there is like you came into that question with so many different angles, and I love how you mentioned and lay out sort of the not like a formula, but the steps that you took along the way from really getting the job and building trust within the company, and then assessing and observing what's around you within the company and also what's happening in the environment within the industry and see if there's any unmet demand that you could do with, let's say, building brand in front of creators and in activating these relationships. And then you actually go about doing this with your podcast, with your meet the creator events and other dinners that you were doing with brand marketers and creators. So this is like super phenomenal. Um, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about the podcast. So Creative Culture is actually one of the podcasts that I really like listening to because there are not many alternatives out there that really focus and hone into understanding the creator him or herself. So I'm really curious, like when you first started the podcast, like do you remember anything from your first episode with Harun?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, so Aisha wasn't the first episode that I recorded. She was the first episode I put out. The first episode I recorded was with why is his name escaping me? Wow, this is happening a lot today. Whatever. It was Phil Ranta. So it was with Phil, and Phil is this deep, deep, deep veteran in the influencer world, the influencer marketing world, the creator space, whatever you want to call it. He's been in it for a long, long time and has seen a ton of success and is just a really good person and really good at explaining and communicating what he believes and why he believes and taking history and taking prediction and kind of merging it together. Um, got Phil on the podcast. Early on, the idea was mix of creator industry professionals and creators. And so I got Phil on the podcast, and I remember I had like 5 questions that I wanted to ask him, and I never listened to it. I don't even remember his answers. I remember like after the podcast ended, it was almost like I blacked out. I didn't have any recollection of his answers. I was not listening to him. I was making sure that I would have the right next question to ask and that I would deliver it in like at least a decent way. Not the way to go about it, but like that's how I started. And I wasn't smart in the sense that I just went for it. I didn't talk to people who had podcasted, didn't get advice on how to prep. So whatever, just went for it. Didn't do enough prep, didn't do enough deep thinking, was not listening to him at all, and just asked questions and wanted to get through it. And that mentality, I think that mentality started me off with the podcast. And I can't remember when I started to feel really comfortable. Actually, I think it was around, I think it was like episode 13 or 14. I remember I interviewed a creator named Maddie Johnson who goes by Living with Pickles. And it just went so well. Like everything was flowing. And like she was saying really interesting stuff. And I think I was pretty astute as to what she was saying and asking her the right questions and kind of going off of script a little bit. And I think then I started to feel a little bit of confidence. But there had also been other episodes where tried to say something or went in with it and really got disheartened like at the beginning or halfway through. I just didn't feel like I connected with the guest or could get good questions out and the brain just felt frozen and I didn't know what to ask half the time. And so that's how it started. And then I think the way it evolved, one, I said enough Like, I do not want to talk to creator industry professionals anymore. Did not find it as interesting as talking to creators, and it makes sense because I feel like I'm more artist at heart than I am so-called operator. Um, and the thing that I think I started to really hone in on is when you interview, the best way to interview, unless you're doing for someone else and there's someone else's objective, but this was very self-serving, this podcast, just ask about the stuff that you feel so interested in. It doesn't matter what you think other people would want to hear. In my case, I was like, I'm just going to start asking about things or bringing things up that I think are really interesting or that come to my mind. And that's kind of how I went about the podcast. And that's how I think my research evolved, because then I would go really deep into the things that I cared for. I didn't really care to learn their whole story, but I cared to go deep on the things that I was naturally fascinated in. And it started to make a lot of sense in the podcast, because then you're speaking to them about something that they feel valued for. You're not asking their story and then what happened next and what happened next and what happened, or like coming with the same questions, or not even responding to them and going, great, next question. Like, you do a good job of pointing out something that I said in my answer and then going to a new question, or pointing it out and then kind of tying it to your next question. And that's kind of how the podcast evolved. It stayed with creators. It was I was like, I'm just going to interview creators that I'm interested in, because I found that I hated interviewing people I wasn't interested in. The research became a lot more fun. The research started to tie into other guests, which allowed me to start to formulate some thoughts. And that's where like the identifying talent and putting people on really started to come through. Like, now I have a whole Notion doc, really. I don't share this with people, but I have a whole Notion doc of all these different indicators of great talent that I've noticed as patterns throughout interviewing these creators. And then it just started to, not started, but it continued. It continued in that way. And I just kept interviewing creators that I was passionate about, kept having fun conversations. And that's kind of where it sits today. I tried interviewing managers and agents for a couple episodes. Truthfully, hated that, because I'm just not as passionate about that, again, as I am an interesting creative. And I think also, at the end of the day, managers and agents are a little bit guarded because they probably have their own secret sauce, and they don't want to be the star of the show. They want their talent to be a star of the show. So totally understand where that came from. And a lot of the episodes I didn't run well at all. Like, I just didn't enjoy it, so I just didn't run them well. And that's kind of where it sits today. And so it's still that. It's still finding creators, no matter big, no matter small, that I find so interesting. And then finding the hour and a half to sit down, to talk with them, to go into the things that I find are really interesting, to go into things that I didn't know about that come up in the episode, and just try to deliver as passionate of a conversation about those people, with those people, for, and again, thank you for listening, man, but for people like yourselves who do enjoy it.
Absolutely. Like, I feel like passionate is probably the word that I would describe, like, the the way you treat the podcast, and also like the way that you communicate across the table. Like, I feel like you're very passionate about interviewing creators. You're very passionate about like helping creators and connecting creators with one another, identifying talents. Like, you're so passionate in all these areas.
Thank you, man.
Um, was there like a favorite moment or like episode that you have done where you were surprised by anything that they said, or surprised by something that you learned along the way?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there were a couple things. I think one of my favorite moments was doing it live at an event that we threw as hashtag paid at those Meet the Creator events. We've done it twice now, and it's just such a different energy. It feels a lot more human. It feels a lot more natural. And I think in large part because I'm interviewing over the computer, over Riverside a lot of the time, compared to just doing it in person and having fun. Um, there were times where I started to notice patterns, which were really exciting. Like, some of my favorite patterns are when a creator can create out of spite and do that really successfully, but it's not their core thing. It's not what they're like good for, want to be known for, but someone said they couldn't. They wanted to show someone or some people that they could, and they get to the top and they really succeed with it. To me, that shows, oh, there's a superpower somewhere in you, and you just need the right person to help you bring that out on a daily or a more frequent basis without it being so erratic and being so uncontrolled. So that
Mhm.
was really cool to find out. I remember learning how who's now a friend, creator Grace Wells, amazing creator who essentially is a one-stop shop for product commercials. She builds her sets, she creates different product commercials in such an interesting and I would say like forward-thinking way, and just so enjoyable to watch. So talented. And I remember she spoke about how in grade 7 she loved history but found that the history book was so boring, or the chapter that they were reading was so boring, that she rewrote for fun. She just rewrote the textbook. And I was like, what? Like, you were in grade 7 or grade 8, you're 12, you're 13, and you have this deep feeling inside of you that makes you do something that is tough and is rewarding for just you, for no one else. Like, so many boxes checked and so much curiosity popped up. So that was Grace. I remember getting to interview who is now one of my favorite people, and I think is many people's favorite people, is a guy named Tim Chisano, who's now a 45 or 46-year-old ad agency exec, but he creates on the side, and just one of the most fascinating humans I've ever met. So getting the chance to talk with him and then build a bit of a friendship there has meant a lot to me, and has put me in really interesting spaces mentally, of like things to think about and things to chase. Um, and then I would say another fun moment was when I got to interview a creator. I've only co-hosted one episode of the podcast, and there's a friend at hashtag paid who's probably as passionate and as knowledgeable about the creator space as, or maybe not as passionate, but like very close to it. And she has skills that complement mine. Like, she's unbelievable at her job. Her name's Delaney. Shout out to you, Delaney. That's my bet. I think she's gonna be mad successful in life. But anyway, that's not the point of this. But I said to her, because she was the only other person at hashtag paid that we would always jam on creators and talk about it. I was like, oh, who's a creator that you'd want to get on? If I can get them on, do you want to come co-host it with me? And she's like, yeah, for sure, let's do it. And co-hosting the episode with Corporate Natalie was a ton of fun, because you got to see her passion come through. And it was almost like I tried to step back and give Delaney as much reign to just ask whatever the question she was. And again, like, that's the idea of getting to experience things for the first time with people that you really value, you really like, you really believe in. Like, that newness together is so formative. So that was a ton of fun. So yeah, man, I can go on and on, but many great memories, many great thought starters, many great friendships. Many great learnings that I'm grateful for having been given the opportunity to start the podcast, and then continued just to keep recording the podcast.
I see. I see. I also have like the corporate natives story down as well. Like I feel like that is so phenomenal because it just goes to show like how everyone, like maybe on the internet it seems like everyone is like segregated, like there's one channel here and one channel there that you subscribe to, but if you really try to humanize it, like everyone is connected in some capacity. Like
Mm-hmm.
subscribers are connected to subscribers, subscribers connected to creators, creators are connected to creators. So I think, yeah, I think that is like a very nice like testimony of like what that really feels like. Um, like I want to ask, maybe might sound a bit synonymous, but what is one of those unexpected thing that you came out of the podcast?
Mm. There's a couple. The one thing that comes to mind is learning about communication styles and going deeper than, and getting to reflect on conversations that were had, to learn about the intricacies of a good conversation, and getting to better understand the human, or assess the human or the humans that you're talking to. Like, when I first started, as I was saying, I was really focused on me asking the right questions. What I really try to do now is get rid of the nerves, because the nerves are always there, even if the person's well, actually no, if the person's a friend already, there's no nerves. But the nerves are usually there for people that are new, regardless, big or small. And a lot of that time, those nerves, again, you just want to go to this comfortable place. So you just want to make sure that you're asking the right question, or that you're asking the question that you want to say, and you're not listening to them. And I think there's so much about what people say and how people deliver things that can give you like that's like the window into diving further into the things that really matter to them. So it's things like if someone says obviously in front of their answer, if I'm saying to you, yeah, so like I did like 80 episodes and obviously it was something that was tough. The interesting thing there is that's obvious to them. That's not obvious to anyone else. Why is that obvious to them? That would be something that I would pick up, that I started to pick up on and go, oh, that's cool. That's cool. Like, why is it obvious that you had to do 80 episodes? And then you start to really go deeper onto who they are, and maybe there's an interesting story, or maybe there's just some depth in the way that they can explain something that can unlock an aha moment in someone else, or take the conversation in an interesting way. There's other places where if someone keeps bringing something up amongst different questions that you're asking, it subconsciously tells that either that's important to them, that they really want to talk about it, or there's something there that they want to explore that maybe they don't even know they want to explore, but that repetition is really important. So it's these little things that I started to pick up when interviewing that I think has helped me to become a much better communicator when I turn it on. I definitely have ADHD. I haven't been diagnosed. I definitely have it, but when I turn on like listening mode and or my podcast mode, I can start to pick things up, and then that relates to again that puts you into this magic. I'd almost call it like a magic system where you can't prep for it, but if you can pick it up in real time, you can get to places that you've probably never thought you can experience. Maybe they haven't been able to experience, or things that they haven't been able to say that you're kind of unlocking for them. So I think that would be the biggest thing. And I think the second thing I would say, and this is not revolutionary at all, but I've done 80 episodes, and dude, that's still not that much. Like, yes, I've done it on and off for the past 2.5 years, and that's great. And I'm so happy I've done it, reaped so many rewards, learned so much, met great people, but it's still not a lot. Like, you have to put in so many reps, man. You have to put in so many reps to get good at something. And two, you have to put so many reps in and be intentional with it to really get somewhere. If I wanted to do this full time and I wanted to be a host and wanted that to be the thing that I'm doing with my life, I would probably approach it a little bit different. I would go, okay, what do I want to change this episode? And then the next 3 episodes or 4 episodes work on it. Cool. Then figure out what I want to do next, or what do I want to tweak. The podcast has kind of been a bit of an escape and a relief for me. Like, I meet a creator or I reach out to a creator, you want to jam? Let's jam. And then I just go about the conversation after the good research. I go about the conversation, ask the questions that I really want to ask, try be as intentful as a listener as possible, and then put it out. But I haven't given myself the best chance to grow. I've grown internally, but grow the actual media property of it, because it hasn't been the number one thing. And so putting in 80 episodes is great. And like, I don't want to be that kid that's like, oh, I only got 95 on my test in high school. I actually didn't do that well. Not saying that, but at this point, I feel confident interviewing. But what would it look? But like, you got to do 3, 4, 500. I have a good friend in Toronto who's an amazing, amazing interviewer. I think he's one of the best interviewers that I know, and one of the best interviewers that I've seen. And I think he had his own show and he did 300 episodes. And now he's kind of playing around and doing different things, and he's cooking something up that's so exciting. But 300 episodes, no wonder he's so refined and he's so good with his process. So the communication styles and picking up things that I would have never assessed before, that have now, I think, given me a little bit of a superpower, and the need to do things for a long period of time in order to really, really, really get good at them. And even though it's available to start a podcast, doesn't mean that you're going to be good for a long time.
Absolutely. Like, I really like the idea that you mentioned about like having published over 80 episodes, knowing like almost like 90 of the podcasts out there don't last over like 6 or 7 episodes. Like, I think it takes obviously a lot of effort, a lot of consistency. And I think you mentioned about like podcasts is easy to create, but it doesn't mean you be good at it. I think that's a very important feature of just media or creative art in general.
Mm.
Um, I think what I'm really curious about, which is like over the course of like the last 2.5 years, how do you reiterate on your communication style, the way that you put on a podcast mode? How do you go like internally with like absorbing other content, learning about other podcasts, talk to other people, or maybe externally, like going back to your guests and like approach them and get feedback from them? Like, what was your approach look like?
Yeah. Um, Not a lot, truthfully. Not a lot. I didn't really run the scientific method. Um, I think it was more the act of doing it that was the checkbox, was the fulfillment for me. I've never asked a guest for feedback, truthfully. Um, I haven't, I think it was maybe the first couple episodes, maybe I sent them to some friends and was like, oh, what do you think? And they're like, oh, you're speaking too slow here, or you should do this. But never really asked for feedback and never really reflected on my process until I would say now. Until now. Like I've picked up on things as I was like randomly picked up on these communication styles, that talking conversation. I was like, oh wait, I'm noticing this thing. Like now it's coming to the surface. Or oh wow, that's interesting that I'm noticing this stuff in talent. I've heard this in 3 talent that I really respect that came on the podcast. Maybe that's something to ask about. Or when that pops up, I get really giddy about it, and that's all I want to talk about. Um, but in terms of consistently improving, wasn't really the focus. Where I land right now, I think this is the first time that I've sat down to go, all right, what do I want to do with this podcast? Because I've shown that I have the consistency. I've shown that I can put in the work. I've shown that I think I'm good as a host and I'm good at finding the talent and I can do all that myself. I've learned a little bit about editing. But I think what I've come to, which is a massive, massive, massive blocker, is again, this podcast was very self-serving. Very self-serving for me, very self-serving for hashtag paid. It wasn't built and it was never operated with who's this for? Like, what do they want to hear? And where's the intersection between what do I want to deliver and what do they want to hear? It was always, what do I want to deliver? The tagline was always conversations with underrated creators hosted by Desatnik. Like, unless you're like me and there's not that many like me or you who like to study these creatives or want to spend time in the minds of creatives, yeah, there's some people, but that's not going to lead to growth. Like, the more important thing is that you get to a point where you start to recognize, oh, I'm good at doing this myself. I can do it for me really successfully. Now, if I want to build this thing, or if I want to really get out to the world and take it to the next level, there's a couple things to consider. And so those things that I'm considering right now are, who am I really going to be podcasting for? Like, who's that one person? Or what is the thing? What is the value? What is the real value of spending time and wanting to come back week after week? That's more than just something that's super, super nuanced. Like, again, people like being A&Rs, me and you. The second thing is, since everyone can start a podcast today, and since everyone can get people on, and people can all we can all have conversations, what is the level above? Like, how do you go to the next level with a podcast to really not only stand out? It's just always been something that's driven me of, how do you do something cool that hasn't really been done? Or how do you get to a point where you're differentiated? And I think distinct is the word that my VP of marketing has always drilled into my head. And the thing that I'm so grateful for is, how do you be distinct with everything that you do, that, or at least with everything that you do that you really care for? And that's where I sit right now. Is I want to still talk to creators. I enjoy hosting. I really do enjoy podcasting, but I need to now think, what is the next era going to be and who's it going to be for? Who am I? So once I know that, then how am I going to serve them? But then also, how am I going to serve myself? And then what is that extra piece of, like, what's that extra sauce that's going to be distinct? So I'm actually recording my last episode on Monday before taking a break and then really thinking about, what does this look like? I don't think I'm going to run more episodes for the rest of the year. I think I'm going to kind of shut down creator culture just for now, so that I can be really, really intentional, because I was just doing it for me. And this, to tie a bow on the question that you asked, there wasn't that much feedback that I looked for or that I even got. I was very much in my own bubble, in my own vacuum, just doing my own thing. And I think that's valuable to a point. And I'm at a point now where I've put in the reps. Okay, I've put in the reps, but what's next? How do you get to, if I really want to podcast, if I really want to be known, and if I really want to leave a legacy, do cool things, what is that cool thing? And I think you have to step away from the environment that you were in for a long, long time to internally get feedback. And then to your point, yeah, now I'm definitely talking to people and saying, like, what would you do? How are you thinking about this? What are the cool things you're thinking about? What's distinct in a podcast that you like? Kind of crowdsourcing. And then hopefully something beautiful will come out in the next couple of months.
That's awesome. Like I can see how much time that you spend just like internally reflecting on the work that you have done, the podcast that you built, the community that you have built for creator culture, and excited to hear like what would come out of it in the next few months. I I'm curious about the idea of playlist storyteller. Um, so that was an initiative you started. I think it was around this summer. Basically, you gather a bunch of artists from Toronto. Everyone would come to someone's house with a few songs and tell a story based on it. Like, like, can you maybe tell it in your own words? Like, what is playlist storyteller, and how
Yeah,
did it come to life?
for sure. Playlist Storytellers came out of a conversation with two people actually. I remember I was in LA last October, and again, music is so much to me, so much of my life. I spend so much time with it. I get so much joy from it. And I was walking in LA, and I was tweeting with a friend, or tweeting, like responding to a friend, and somehow Kid Cudi came up, and I know who Kid Cudi is. I've listened to some of his songs. I have some of his songs saved, but he's not an artist I've ever gone into or really. I can't identify that I'm a huge Kid Cudi fan. And I asked my friend, all right, cool, give me 5 songs that maybe I wouldn't know, because he loves Kid Cudi. And so he gives me 5 songs, and I'm listening to it, and every song I'm listening to, then I'm just hitting him back on text, or I don't know if it was a tweet or text, being like, "Oh, dude, this like wow, this puts me in this mode," or "Oh, so cool, I had no idea this existed," or "Oh, the feeling on this," or like the way this happened. And then we started jamming on music together, and we're like, oh, it'd be cool if we kind of do something around, get people that love music like this and jam. So that was kind of idea that permeated. And then another friend who lives in LA also loves music, and I think we connected over music, amongst some other things. And I think this idea came up as well, something like this, like let's get people together to tell stories around music, or let's get people together to do something around music. Or let's just do dinners with me around music, or something like that. And so it's these two people, shout out Jenna, shout out Zawar, for planting these seeds, and that we were kind of collaborating on. And then the first time was when I went back to LA. I lived there for the month of February, and Zawar was going to be there, and we started jamming and said, all right, like, why don't we try this? Why don't we just try get fans of music, or people that love music together? What, they could be artists, they could just be fans, in a room. Everyone brings a story, a life experience that's nostalgic to them, related to a song. Everyone gets up and tells that story, and then we all listen to the song together. And that's what we did for the first, I think it was 10 people in LA. Luckily, a friend was able to give their house to us for like 2 hours, and it was a ton of fun. And that sparked, and I was like, oh, this is so cool, I want to do this more. And so then did it 4 times after that, 4 or 5 times after that in Toronto, and then went to New York, and Zawar was also in New York at a time in July, and we're like, yo, let's do 2 nights. And we found 2 spaces, and people were really kind to give some space, and we found some people. We ran Play those Storytellers, and then did it again when I was in Toronto. And now the thought is very much, again, this is doing everything I love. I love bringing people together. I love music, and I love like really cool, distinct, curated experiences for a small group, not for a big group. And so this is really staying analog. I don't post about it really. I don't have a store. I don't have a page. I don't have socials. I don't nothing around it. I say on my on Instagram that I'm building playlist storytellers in case, again, someone's like, "Oh, what's that?" and they're a music fan. It's purely for like curiosity perspective. So maybe I can meet a couple people passively that would want to come to this, and that's the goal with this. I don't know where it goes. It's definitely going to stay analog for a little bit. And they're one of the best nights that I get to experience get to host, get to bring really cool people together, hear more music, learn about more music. And the goal with it, truthfully, is to, in, I don't know if it's this year or next year, got to set a date and then go for it, is to bring this live, is to find four or five, probably four storytellers around a song in a genre or related to a feeling that is really important to them, that relates to a story, and they're great storytellers around it. And they get up on stage as the vision, they tell that story, and then I hire a band to play that song live, and everyone in the audience gets to hear great music and also gets to hear great stories. And that's what Playlist Storytellers Live is going to look like. I don't know when, I don't know who it's going to involve, but I know it's going to come to life. But again, I think the root cause is, how do you create, and this is stuff I think about a lot, and the stuff I really care for, is how do you create spaces, or how do you create events that reinforce all the types of people that you really want to connect with and you get a lot of joy from connecting? And how do you experience these things together and give people new people to meet, new things to walk away with, and maybe an experience that they want to come back to? And so, Play the Storytellers in the works, lots of R&D around it, but have a ton of fun.
So I feel like there's like a constant theme of you really trying and being very intentional and passionate about creating curated experiences for creators. Like just throughout this whole conversation, from creating, like hosting the podcast, organizing Meet the Creators in New York, Toronto, um, and LA, and also doing this Play Storyteller initiative just literally just at your basement. It's just like a project, but it can grow into something bigger. I am curious for audience who might not have sort of the passion, or like the thing that you're so keen and passionate about. Like how did you sort of figure that out? Like that was the thing that you want to spend time on for like a long time, or like in your career.
Yeah, and it was very recent. It was this year that all this stuff kind of came together, or things started to make a lot of sense. Um, how did you figure it out, or how did I figure it out? One, it was just time spent. Like, let's call this 5 years of leaving accounting, trying to get into the business side of the music industry, finding the creator space, doing the thing. Da 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 da. At year 5, I started to realize it. Really started to realize it. So again, I think things kind of take time. That's one. Um, Two is being observational and giving yourself time to think and really reflect. A couple people over time, when I would throw things, would say like, "Oh, you're good at this. Like, you're good at bringing people together, and it seems like you like it." And I'd be like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. Yeah, whatever." And I'd brush it off. And then, this is going to sound like typical 2023, but I a friend of mine who runs a podcast, shout out to Danny Miranda, unbelievable human, doing unbelievable things, and it has a drive and a work ethic and a skill that many other people don't, and a long-term vision, I would say, that many other people don't. And I was listening to a bunch of his episodes, and he kept talking about how what got him started with the podcast was going about, I think he said it was a 60-day challenge, hour a day meditation, so that he could just sit internally with his own thoughts and kind of see where things go and really figure out the subconscious. I don't know exactly in his words how he says it, but that's kind of how I interpreted it. And I don't know what compelled me to try something similar, but I think it was in May or June, I just started to go, cool, I'm going to go an hour a day I said for 60 days. And I did an hour a day for around 30 days, and then kept meditating around 45 minutes for a couple days after that. Didn't hit the 60, but what I was able to see is, when I just had time, I had an hour to sit with myself and like let your mind run. And the coolest thing from it is, I think a lot of people think that meditation is like, oh, it calms you down and you can deal with anxiety and you're able to compartmentalize and go through life at a slower pace. I didn't get anything of that. What I got was, the first time in my life, giving myself an hour to just think about nothing, like whatever would come in. And sometimes I'd let my mind run, and my mind would always go to the three places. Always, when I said, essentially, my mind, go think about whatever the hell you want to think about. So that was pattern recognition of, oh, and relationships and connections was one of them. And then giving myself time to just think. And there were times where I remember, like, I would ask the question, like, what am I good at? What would I build a legacy off of? And you start thinking about, well, what are the things I've done that I've really enjoyed? And what are the things that I've done that I've enjoyed and I've been really good at? And it was always bringing people together. It was always distinct experiences. Sometimes it was media, sometimes it was analog. And it just became really, really obvious to me. And around that time, so it's giving yourself time to see things out. It's being observational and giving yourself time to reflect. And the third thing was then once I started to reflect and I started to see that as true, as, oh, maybe this is my superpower in the world. Maybe this is the thing that I'm really good at in the world. When I would get a compliment from people, put a dinner together, whatever it may be, and they'd be like, "Oh wow, you're really good at this," or "Thank you for doing this. Like that was amazing. Haven't had that opportunity ever or in a long time." That would really start to internalize of, oh, okay, now there's your question on feedback, right? Now there's feedback. I wasn't even asking for it, but now there's feedback. And a high school friend who's the farthest thing from this industry, he's a doctor, has always said, "Yo, you're really good at bringing people together." And so I think it's like you have time, you give yourself time to play, you give yourself time to reflect, and then you give yourself time to notice patterns. And I think you do a disservice to yourself if you know the path of least friction for you. Now, I don't mean the thing that's easiest, but I mean the thing that you enjoy most, that you're going to go fastest on because it's so in line with who you want to be. And was thinking about this a couple months ago where I would be stupid to try be someone else. I would be stupid to try fight the urge and the innate ability and the pull and the magnetic force that I have around this doing cool things that are in person, distinct, unique experiences, et cetera, connecting people. And that's where it's come to, man. So again, like time reflecting and then recognizing that maybe I want to be that cool person building something really cool. Maybe I want to be that cool big creator, like with a massive audience, doing some really cool stuff. But at the end of the day, the thing that I've shown myself I'm really good at and people say that I'm really good at and that I do genuinely love is this idea of bringing people together, curating experiences, da 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 da. And so 5 years of that has come to the point where now I'm actually leaving hashtag paid in a week and a half and focusing on, again, supporting creators that I really, really care for over the long term. And a lot of the time is bringing through mechanisms of bringing different people together, surrounding people with the right people, and then looking to be able to build around these different instincts and around Meet the Creators, the idea of what Meet the Creators was, or Play the Storytellers, or creator culture. So time in, just time to observe.
Yep, this is such a great like this is such a great answer to wrap up. Like I feel like you mentioned three distinctive things. Like first being time to play, second being time to think, and three being time to observe. Like any pattern recognitions or like any from external feedback, asking from your friends, what do you think of me? What do you think my superpower is? I think this is like phenomenal. I like you should I like to wrap this podcast off with a challenge. So then like for the audience who's tuning in right now, like if you have to think about a challenge that they could act on, like
Mm.
is there anything top of mind?
Yeah, I would say think of the environment or the type of people you love being around and that or gives you the most energy or you're the happiest, where you walk away from those people or those environments feeling more excited or refreshed than you do drained. And I get some people are extroverts and some people are introverts. I totally get that, but I actually think this does apply to introverts as well. Finding out what that is or thinking on what that is, and then consciously creating a time or an environment or a space to be with those people and do it on your own. Create your own momentum around that stuff. I think what you'll find is you'll deepen your relationships. You'll probably meet new people that are going to become really important in your life. And it's going to be a space of like bliss and refuge for you from the world we live in, fucking tons of social media, misinformation, war, this, culture, that, drama, that, whatever the hell it is. And that's meant a lot. It's meant a lot to me. It hasn't been that hard, and I'm trying to say this like with the recognition that I love doing this, but it doesn't have to be crazy. It doesn't have to be big. Please don't post it on social media. Like do it for yourself. The only thing is the checkbox that you've done it and you're around those people. you want to post about it later on, fine, but do it for yourself and no one else. And I think everyone would get a lot of fulfillment and just like a really comfortable warm blanket feeling from being able to create that and put that into the world where you get to surround yourself. Maybe it's once a month, maybe it's once a year, but you get to surround yourself with people that really reinforce what you love so that the future is a lot more exciting.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the pod, Danny. This has been like so phenomenal, and thank you so much for coming. All the best for your new role.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. And cool to see. I know we've jammed over the past year or so, or something like that. And to see you again willingly like putting things on or trying to put dinners on or trying to build community or and just diving into a podcast and doing it well where I like the way that you responded to things. I like the way that you asked questions of things that you were interested in. So excited to see where you go too, man. And again, thank you for the honor of asking me to be on the podcast.
Awesome. One last thing,
Yeah.
where can people find you?
Where can people find me? On all social media, I am Datkeed, Datkeed. I guess all social media. I mean, IG and Twitter. Name's Danny Desatnik on other platforms. And podcast is Creator Culture.
Awesome. Link will be in the descriptions. Thank you. Have a good one.